I had spent the entire morning in the kitchen, carefully frosting a chocolate cake with buttercream roses, Sophia's favorite when she was a little girl. I even used the same chipped porcelain mixing bowl my mother gave me years ago, back when baking for my daughter still felt like a joy instead of a ritual of disappointment. She was turning 27, and despite everything that had happened between us in the past few years, the shouting matches, the slammed doors, the nights she didn't come home, I wanted to believe maybe this year could be different. Maybe she would see the cake, the balloons I had quietly set up, and remember that beneath all the tension, I was still her mother. I balanced the cake in one hand and held her gift in the other. A simple silver locket with a picture of us on her first day of kindergarten tucked inside. I thought it might remind her that once upon a time, she needed me, trusted me, even adored me. That thought kept me steady as I walked toward the backyard, where the music was blasting. The bass rattled the sliding glass door. Her friends were already there. Cars lined the curb outside, red plastic cups littered the patio, and the smell of spilled beer carried through the air. I paused before stepping out, wanting to time my entrance so she'd notice me, and that's when I heard it. Sophia's voice, loud, mocking, dripping with sarcasm. Honestly, the best gift my mom could give me this year is just disappearing from my life. Imagine how peaceful that would be. Her friends roared with laughter. Some clinked their cups together, egging her on. I froze. The cake tilted dangerously in my hands. For a moment I thought I had misheard, that maybe it was someone else, maybe just a cruel joke out of context. But then Sophia repeated it, louder this time, as if she wanted the whole neighborhood to hear. No, really, guys, if she could just vanish, that'd be the perfect birthday present. Laughter again. My chest tightened, like someone had driven a stake straight through me. I had imagined so many possible scenarios for this birthday. Maybe she'd roll her eyes at the decorations, but still eat the cake. Maybe she'd hug me out of obligation. I never once imagined she would wish me gone, wish me erased from her world, while surrounded by people who knew I was right inside the house. I stood there, half hidden by the curtain, the candles trembling on top of the cake. My hands shook so badly, I thought the frosting roses might slide off. The locket box slipped from under my arm and clattered softly to the tile floor. No one outside noticed. They were too busy laughing at my daughter's cruel punchline. I wanted to scream, to fling open the door and shout that she had no idea what sacrifices I'd made for her. The years of working double shifts at the diner to afford her school supplies. The nights I patched up her scraped knees. The endless times I sat by her bedside when she was sick. But the words caught in my throat. Anger burned hot, but beneath it was a hollowness so deep I could barely breathe. I thought about the first time I held her. How tiny she was. How I promised in that sterile hospital room that no matter what, I would never abandon her. And now, 27 years later, my daughter's birthday wish was for me to vanish. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the sliding door. The music pulsed through the window, muffled and distorted, like the heartbeat of a stranger. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Because if I cried now, it would feel like she had won. Like her words had the power to finally break me completely. So instead, I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and set the cake carefully on the kitchen counter. The candles flickered out one by one under the air conditioning vent. I stared at the darkened wicks and thought, if disappearance is what she wants, maybe that's exactly what I should give her. It wasn't a decision yet, just a whisper in my mind, but it was the first crack in the wall, the moment when years of resentment and exhaustion finally shifted into something else, something colder, something final. The rest of that afternoon blurred together in a haze of noise and shadows. I moved mechanically, stacking dirty dishes in the sink, straightening the curtains, anything to keep my hands busy so I wouldn't collapse into tears. I tried to tell myself it was just a joke, that young people exaggerate, that Sophia didn't really mean it, but the echo of her words wouldn't leave me. The best gift would be if she disappeared. It was the casual cruelty that gutted me most. She didn't say it in anger, not in the middle of a fight where emotions ran high. She said it laughing, with her friends, like my absence would be a relief. I could almost imagine the silence after my funeral in her mind. No nagging, no reminders, no expectations. Just freedom. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the locket I had picked up from the floor. The tiny hinge was dented from the fall, but it still opened. Inside was that picture of us, me in my waitress uniform, hair frizzed from the humid summer, holding her little hand on her first day of kindergarten. Her face was round, cheeks flushed with excitement, backpack straps hanging off her narrow shoulders. I remembered how she clung to me that morning, how she cried and begged not to be left alone. "Don't leave, Mommy," she had whispered. Now she wanted nothing more than for me to vanish. The cruel irony twisted in my gut. I had built my life around not leaving her. When her father walked out, I stayed. When money ran short, I took double shifts. When she got in trouble at school, I faced the teachers, the counselors, the glares. I was the one constant, the safety net that caught her every time she fell. And somehow, that had become the very thing she resented most. It's strange, the way memory works when your heart is shattered. As I sat there, I wasn't just hearing Sophia's cruel laughter. I was hearing echoes of all the times she had rolled her eyes, dismissed me, or pushed me away. The slammed doors. The words she'd spit out like poison. "You don't understand me. You're pathetic. You're just a waitress, not even successful." Each moment replayed itself with sharper clarity, as though my brain was determined to rub salt in the wound. But then other memories fought their way in too, uninvited. Her first ballet recital, where she wore that pink tutu that was too big and tripped over her own feet. She looked at me in the audience and grinned with such pride that my chest had nearly burst. Or the time she came home from middle school, crying because some boy made fun of her braces, and I sat on the couch with her for hours, telling her that she was beautiful, that she'd grow into her smile. Those memories used to feel like warmth. Now they felt like betrayal, because I couldn't reconcile that sweet little girl with the cold young woman who wished me gone. The wound went deeper, because I realized something terrifying. Maybe I had raised her to believe she didn't need me. I had given everything, too much maybe. Shielded her from consequences, bailed her out of mistakes, defended her even when she was wrong. Perhaps I had given so much of myself that she came to see me not as a person, but as an obstacle. It was like discovering a tumor had been growing in secret all these years. The laughter outside was just the symptom finally breaking through. I remember clutching that locket so tightly it left a mark in my palm, and I whispered to the picture, "What happened to us, baby? When did love turn into this?" The pain wasn't just sadness, it was humiliation. Knowing her friends heard it, knowing she wanted the world to laugh at my expense. That was what hardened something inside me, because pain alone might have led me to forgive. But humiliation? That leaves scars that demand action. By the time the party wound down and the last car pulled away, I had already decided one thing. I would not let this wound fester in silence anymore. The next time I saw Sophia, I would not pretend. I would not smile through gritted teeth. I was done covering her cruelty with frosting and candles. she wanted me gone. And for the first time, I began to wonder if granting that wish might be the only way left to love her and myself. I didn't sleep that night. The house reeked of stale beer and cigarette smoke, a reminder of the chaos my daughter had invited under my roof. I sat in the living room, lights off, the locket clutched in my hand, replaying her words again and again. By morning, exhaustion gave way to a cold clarity. If Sophia wanted a war, then she'd finally see that her mother wasn't weak. The following evening, she threw another party, because of course she did. The music thumped through the walls, shaking picture frames on the shelves. Strangers tramped mud across my rug. Laughter bubbled up from the backyard, carefree and cruel. I stood at the foot of the stairs, listening to them chant her name, urging her to chug another drink. Something snapped in me. I wasn't going to hide in the kitchen anymore. I straightened my shoulders, marched to the sliding glass door, and threw it open. The sudden silence was almost comical. The crowd of 20-somethings turned toward me, faces shining with beer and sweat mid-laugh. Sophia was in the middle, perched on a lawn chair like some sort of queen bee, red cup in hand. I didn't yell. My voice was steady, louder than the music had been. "Enough, this party is over." You could have heard a pin drop. Sophia blinked at me, then smirked. "Oh my God, Mom. Could you be more dramatic? We're just celebrating. Chill out." Her friends chuckled, emboldened by her bravado. I stepped onto the patio, barefoot, the cool stone biting into my skin. "This is my house, my rules. Turn off the music. Everyone leaves. Now." A boy in a backward cap laughed and muttered, "Buzzkill," under his breath. Another girl rolled her eyes and whispered something to Sophia that made her snort. That snort was worse than any insult. "Do you think this is funny?" I asked her. My voice cracked then, but I pushed through. "I stood in that kitchen yesterday, with a cake and a gift, and I heard you tell your friends the best present would be if I disappeared. Did you really mean that?" The smirk on her face faltered for a second, just a flicker, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, please, Mom. It was a joke. God, you're so sensitive." She raised her cup in mock toast. "Here's to my mom, the queen of overreaction." The crowd burst out laughing, some clapping, some whistling. My cheeks burned hot, my chest pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. But humiliation only sharpened my resolve. "You think I'm overreacting?" I asked quietly. "You've turned this home into a circus. You've disrespected me, this house, everything I've worked for. This ends tonight." I reached for the stereo and yanked the cord from the outlet. The music cut off with a pop. A collective groan rose from the crowd. Sophia jumped to her feet, slamming her cup down so hard it splashed across the patio. "You can't do this! This is my party!" "No," I said firmly, meeting her eyes. "This is my house, and I'm done being a doormat." Her friends shifted uncomfortably, some already gathering their things. But a few stayed, waiting for the show to continue. Sophia crossed her arms, her chin jutting out defiantly. "You can't just boss me around. I'm not a kid anymore." "You're right," I said. "You're an adult, which means if you want to party, pay rent, and live without rules, you can do it somewhere else, not under my roof." That silenced the laughter. The weight of my words hung heavy in the humid night air. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. I looked at my daughter, the girl I had raised, the woman who had mocked me, and I realized I was no longer begging for her love. I was demanding my dignity. And that was something no one at that party could take away from me. The silence after my words was deafening. You could almost hear the crickets outside the fence, filling the void left by the cut music. A few of Sophia's friends shuffled awkwardly, muttering about finding another place to drink, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden change in atmosphere. But Sophia? She didn't flinch. Her eyes narrowed, her arms crossed over her chest like a fortress. "You're unbelievable," she spat. "It's one night where I get to feel like this is my space. But no, you have to swoop in and make it all about you." I steadied my breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "This isn't about me. It's about respect. And if you can't respect me, you can't stay here." The words should have been simple, reasonable. But Sophia's pride was a raging fire, and I had just thrown gasoline on it. She laughed, sharp, bitter, defiant. "Respect? From you? Please. You've spent your whole life controlling me, suffocating me, making me feel like I owe you something just for existing." "Well, guess what, Mom? This house isn't your shrine. It's mine now, too." Her friends murmured in approval, a few of them nodding. Someone even clapped. My heart sank, not because of their reaction, but because Sophia needed it. She was performing, grasping at validation from people who barely knew her, people who'd be gone from her life in a month. But me? I had been there for 27 years, and suddenly, I was the enemy. "I said it once, and I'll say it again," I told her, my voice firm. "This is my home. I pay the bills. I keep the lights on. I put food on the table. You don't get to turn it into a bar and laugh in my face while doing it." Sophia stepped closer, close enough for me to smell the cheap vodka on her breath. "You think you're so high and mighty because you pay the bills? You're just a waitress, Mom. A nobody. You've been a nobody my entire life. And you think you can order me around like you're somebody important?" Her words cut through me like knives, sharper than anything she'd said before. I felt them burrow deep into my chest, but I refused to let her see me bleed. I had spent too many years swallowing my pride, too many nights crying into pillows when she lashed out. Tonight, I wasn't backing down. If being a nobody is what it takes to raise a daughter who doesn't respect the roof over her head, then maybe you don't deserve that roof anymore. I snapped. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sophia's face twisted with rage. "You wouldn't dare." I lifted my chin. "Watch me." For a moment, it was just us, mother and daughter locked in a standoff, the rest of the partygoers fading into shadows. Her chest heaved, her fists clenched, and I saw in her eyes a storm of emotions: anger, fear, desperation, pride. She was cornered, and when Sophia was cornered, she always lashed out. "You can't make me leave," she screamed, her voice cracking with fury. "I live here too. You can't just erase me from this house like I'm nothing." I met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "Then prove you're something. Respect me. Respect this home. Otherwise, yes, I can and I will make you leave." The air vibrated with tension. A few more of her friends slipped away quietly, sensing the night was over. But Sophia planted her feet and refused to move, daring me to force her. And in that moment, I realized there was no turning back. We had crossed a line that couldn't be erased with apologies or half-hearted hugs. She had challenged me in front of everyone, called me a nobody, refused to leave my house. What she didn't know, what she couldn't yet see, was that I had finally found the strength to stop being her punching bag. If she wouldn't walk away on her own, I would make sure she was carried out. The standoff couldn't last forever. My heart was pounding so hard, it echoed in my ears, but my voice stayed calm. "Sophia, I'm giving you one last chance. End this party. Tell your friends to leave." Her answer was to snatch the stereo cord from my hand and shove it back into the wall. Music blasted again, louder than before, a deliberate slap in the face. The crowd cheered, rallying behind her rebellion. That was it, the final straw. I walked back into the kitchen, ignoring the laughter trailing behind me. My hands shook as I picked up the phone. I had never called the police on my daughter before. The thought alone made my stomach twist. But something inside me, something bruised, humiliated, and deeply tired, knew this was the only option left. When the dispatcher asked what the emergency was, my voice cracked but didn't falter. My daughter is trespassing in my home. She refuses to leave, and she's hosting an illegal party. I need officers here now. Hanging up the phone felt like slamming a door on 27 years of motherhood. The minutes crawled. Outside, the music thumped, the laughter rose, and I sat at the kitchen table with my head in my hands, waiting for the moment that would change everything. Then the red and blue lights flashed through the curtains. 2 officers stepped into the yard, their presence like a tidal wave that drowned the party in silence. Cups dropped. Cigarettes were stubbed out. Sophia's bravado wavered, but she plastered on a smile. "Oh, hey, officers. Sorry about the noise. We were just—" "Ma'am," one of the officers interrupted, turning to me. "You're the homeowner?" "Yes," I said firmly, though my throat was dry as sand. "And I need these people to leave my property immediately." The officer nodded and raised his voice. "Party's over. Everyone out." Grumbles filled the air, but nobody argued. One by one, her friends filed past, muttering insults under their breath. Within minutes, the yard was empty, save for Sophia. She stood her ground, arms crossed, chin tilted high. "I'm not going anywhere," she hissed, her voice trembling now, more with fear than anger. "You can't make me." The officer's jaw tightened. "If the homeowner asks you to leave and you refuse, it's trespassing. Are you sure this is what you want?" For a moment, I hoped she'd back down, swallow her pride, and walk away. But Sophia's pride had always been her downfall. "Yeah," she said. "I live here too. She can't just kick me out." The officer looked at me. "Do you want to press charges, ma'am?" Time seemed to slow. My chest ached. This was my daughter, the baby I had cradled, the girl whose nightmares I soothed, and now I was being asked if I wanted her arrested like a stranger. I closed my eyes, saw the smirk on her face from the night before, heard her laughter echoing with her friends. The humiliation, the disrespect, the years of being treated like a doormat. And when I opened my eyes, I said the word that sealed our fate. "Yes." The officer stepped forward. "Turn around, ma'am. Hands behind your back." Sophia's eyes widened. "What? No, you can't do this, Mom. This is insane." She struggled as the handcuffs clicked shut, her voice rising into a shriek. "You're ruining my life!" Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I stood tall, my arms folded, watching as my daughter was led toward the flashing lights. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, whispering, watching. I wanted to scream at them that I wasn't a monster, that I had no choice. But deep down, I knew explanations wouldn't matter. As the squad car door slammed shut, Sophia's muffled voice cut through the night. "You'll regret this." The car pulled away, taillights glowing red like the end of a chapter I never thought I'd have to write. For the first time in years, the house was silent, truly silent. But it wasn't peace. It was the silence of aftermath. The kind that makes you realize life will never go back to what it was before. The morning after Sophia was taken away, I wandered through the house like a ghost. Her shoes were still by the door. Her perfume lingered in the hallway, and the living room smelled faintly of stale beer and cigarettes. The silence was so heavy, it pressed against my chest. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, the house was mine alone. You would think I'd feel relief. After all, This was what she had wished for, wasn't it? For me to disappear. Instead, she had disappeared, if only temporarily. But relief wasn't what I felt. What I felt was emptiness. Raw, cavernous emptiness. I stood in her bedroom doorway, staring at the chaos she'd left behind. Clothes in heaps on the floor, half-empty coffee mugs gathering mold on her desk. Makeup smeared across the vanity like war paint. Posters of bands I didn't recognize plastered over the walls where, once upon a time, I had taped up her finger paintings and gold star spelling tests. The sight was a physical ache. I sat on her unmade bed and buried my face in my hands. Was this what my motherhood had come to? A battlefield of resentment and broken promises? I thought back to when she was small, when her world revolved around me. She used to curl up in my lap and fall asleep to the sound of my voice reading fairy tales. Back then, the house echoed with her giggles, not her insults. Somewhere along the way, I had lost her. Maybe I'd lost myself too. Those first few days were the hardest. I kept expecting the door to open, expecting her to come stomping in, demanding dinner, or slamming her bedroom door. But the door never opened, and slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, the emptiness began to shift. One morning, I woke to sunlight pouring through the blinds. The house was quiet, peacefully quiet. I brewed a pot of coffee, and for the first time in years, sat on the porch with my cup in hand, listening to the birds instead of Sophia's music blaring from upstairs. I realized I had forgotten what peace even sounded like. By the third day, I cleaned. Not just the surface-level tidying I usually did, but deep cleaning. I scrubbed the sticky floors, laundered curtains I hadn't touched in years, tossed out piles of junk that had accumulated in corners. With every bag of trash, I felt lighter, as though I was shedding years of resentment along with the clutter. But cleaning wasn't enough. There was a deeper itch under my skin, one that whispered, "This isn't just about the mess, it's about your life." For 27 years, everything I did had revolved around Sophia. My schedule, my money, my emotions, they were all hers to command. And what had I gained? Nothing but disdain and ridicule. For the first time, I wondered, what if I lived for myself? It was a terrifying thought, but also intoxicating. On the 5th day, I called a realtor. Just to ask questions, I told myself, just to see what the market was like. But when she came to walk through the house, clipboard in hand, something inside me clicked. "You could sell quickly," she told me, "especially if you're willing to take a cash offer." A cash offer. 2 weeks of freedom, a chance to disappear. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, weighing the choice. My daughter's words replayed like a broken record. The best gift would be if she disappeared. What if I gave her that gift? What if I gave myself that gift? By the end of the first week, I knew I would sell. I would pack my things, sign the papers, and leave. I didn't know where I would go, just that it had to be far enough away that Sophia couldn't drag me back into the cycle we'd been trapped in. As the second week crept by, the emptiness in the house stopped feeling like loneliness. It started feeling like possibility. And that was the most dangerous feeling of all. Once I admitted the decision to myself that I would sell the house and leave, everything changed. The silence no longer felt oppressive. It felt like a canvas. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the wall, whispered, "You're almost free." The first box I packed was the hardest. It was filled with old photo albums, drawings from kindergarten, and Sophia's childhood toys I could never bring myself to throw away. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, pulling out one artifact after another, each one slicing me open in a different way. There was the teddy bear missing one button eye that she used to drag everywhere. The spelling bee ribbon from 5th grade. The prom dress receipt I'd kept as proof that yes, I had given her the night she wanted, even when I couldn't afford it. I pressed my face into the bear's fur and breathed in the faint trace of dust, my chest aching. Memories like those were the chain that had kept me tied to this house for so long. But now, as painful as it was, I felt the strength to break it. I didn't need the house to keep those memories alive. They were stitched into me already, so I packed them. Not all, some I left behind on purpose, little reminders for Sophia if she ever returned, and wondered where I had gone. But the most precious ones I took with me, like pieces of armor for the road ahead. After that, the momentum carried me forward. Day by day, box by box, the house transformed. I donated piles of clothes I hadn't worn in years. I shredded old bills and stacked my cookbooks neatly into cartons. I even cleared out the attic, a space I'd avoided for years because it was full of broken furniture and moldy boxes of holiday decorations. By the time I was done, the attic was nothing but beams and dust. It felt symbolic, stripping the weight off my shoulders, letting go of things that no longer served me. The realtor called often, her voice brisk and encouraging. "You've got a great property here, Linda. It's going to move fast. I already have buyers lined up who want cash, no contingencies." Her confidence emboldened me. For once, someone saw value in my world, even if it was just the property. But what I didn't tell her, or anyone, was how much I was hiding behind my calm, polite voice. Every time I taped another box shut, a tremor of guilt passed through me. What kind of mother sells the family home while her daughter sits in jail, completely unaware? Was I punishing her too harshly? Was I betraying her in the cruelest way? The guilt would whisper, but then I'd remember her voice at the party, echoing like poison. The best gift would be if she disappeared. She had made her wish. I was only granting it. On the 9th day, I walked through each room deliberately, like a mourner at a funeral. I touched the walls, the kitchen counters, the banister Sophia used to slide down when she was 8. Every corner was loaded with ghosts of laughter, arguments, tears. I whispered goodbye to all of them. When I reached Sophia's room, I lingered longest. I stood at the threshold, looking at the mess I hadn't yet dared to clean. The bed unmade, the posters curling at the edges, the smell of her perfume still clinging to the curtains. This was the heart of the wound, the place where she had grown from my little girl into the woman who now despised me. I sat on her bed, picked up a lipstick rolling loose on the nightstand, and turned it in my hand. How many times had I bought her makeup, clothes, trinkets, anything to make her happy? And yet, happiness had never lasted. I opened the drawer of her nightstand and slipped in a folded sheet of paper. I didn't write much, just a few words, a seed of what would later become the final letter. Sometimes love means letting go. It wasn't a farewell yet, not fully, just a whisper, something she might stumble across one day, if she cared to look. By the 12th day, the moving truck was scheduled. The buyers were coming. The house was no longer mine, it was already halfway gone. And as I sealed the last box, I realized something astonishing. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid of the future. The morning I signed the papers, the air felt different. Crisp, like the world had been scrubbed clean overnight. I woke before sunrise, unable to sleep, and stood by the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching the first streaks of gold stretch across the sky. For years, mornings had felt like obligations. Another day of working, cooking, arguing, apologizing, enduring. But that morning, It felt like possibility. The realtor arrived promptly at 9 with her briefcase and her bright smile. "Are you ready, Linda?" she asked, flipping open a stack of documents on the kitchen table. Ready? Such a small word for such a colossal shift. I nodded. My hands trembled as I picked up the pen, staring down at the contract. The house I had poured my life into, the house where I raised Sophia, where I fought, laughed, cried, and endured, it was all reduced to black ink on white paper. Sign here, initial there. It felt almost obscene how simple it was to give away something that had cost me everything. As I signed my name, memory after memory crashed over me. The time I painted Sophia's room yellow because she said pink was too babyish. The night I stayed up until 3 a.m. sewing her Halloween costume because she changed her mind at the last minute. The Christmas mornings when I carried this very table into the living room so she'd have space to spread out her toys. All those moments sealed with a scrawl of my signature. "Congratulations," the realtor said brightly, sliding the papers back into her folder. "It's official. The buyers will take possession immediately after closing. They'll move in within days." My throat closed. Immediately. Within days. That meant Sophia wouldn't even have a chance to walk through the door again. Not as the owner's daughter. She would come back to find strangers living here. That was the point, wasn't it? To make the cut clean, to leave no room for her to claw her way back into this house or into my control. Still, I had to sit down, because the weight of what I'd just done made my knees buckle. The realtor handed me an envelope with the cashier's check. "You've got a good sum here. Enough to start fresh anywhere you want." She gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze, then left me in the echoing quiet of what was no longer my home. I sat at the table long after she left, the envelope untouched. Money wasn't the part that mattered. Freedom was, but freedom has a price. And for me, the price was leaving my daughter behind in a way she would never forgive. That night, I wrote the note. Not a letter, just a note. Brief, sharp, impossible to misinterpret. I folded it carefully, tucked it into an envelope, and placed it on Sophia's nightstand, where she couldn't miss it. "Happy birthday, Sophia. You wished I would disappear, so I did. The house is gone. I'm gone. Learn how to live without me. Mom." 40 words, give or take, enough to tell her everything and nothing. I stared at those words for a long time before sealing the envelope. They were harsh. Cruel, even. But hadn't she been cruel first? Hadn't she laughed at me, mocked me, humiliated me? This was the only way to make her understand that words have consequences. That you can't burn someone down and expect them to stay. By the time I crawled into bed, the house was half empty, stripped of furniture and clutter. The walls echoed. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage after the curtain had fallen, waiting for the next act to begin. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the note burning like fire in my mind. There was no going back. Tomorrow, the buyers would be here. Tomorrow, I would be gone. And for the first time in years, I slept without fear of what Sophia would say or do when she came home. Because she would no longer have a home to return to. The 14th day arrived with the same clarity as the first frost of winter. I woke before dawn, my body restless, my chest tight with anticipation. Today, Sophia would be released. Today, she would come back, not to me, not to her home, but to strangers. I didn't plan to be there. At least, that's what I told myself. But curiosity is a stubborn thing, and guilt is even worse. So after loading the last of my bags into the car, I parked a block away and waited, my eyes trained on the house that was no longer mine. The buyers had already moved in. A young couple, eager and bright-eyed, with two little boys who left chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Their laughter drifted through the morning air as they played catch on the lawn. The sight was bittersweet. A family who wanted what I once had: a home, a chance, a fresh start. Around noon, a taxi pulled up. My breath caught in my throat. Sophia stepped out, dragging a small rolling suitcase behind her. She looked different, thinner, paler, her hair pulled back messily. Prison, even for 2 weeks, had drained some of the shine from her. She paused at the curb, squinting against the sunlight, then her eyes fell on the house. For a moment, her face softened, almost relieved. She was home, or so she thought. She rolled her suitcase up the walkway, already reaching for her phone, probably to text one of her friends about surviving jail. But then the front door opened. The young woman stepped out, holding a baby on her hip. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but firm. Sophia froze. She blinked once, twice, then laughed nervously. No. This is my house." The woman's brow furrowed. "No, it isn't. We bought this house last week." Confusion spread across Sophia's face like a storm cloud. "What are you talking about? My mom lives here. This is our house. Move aside." She tried to push past the woman, but the man appeared in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, protective. "You need to leave," he said firmly. "This isn't your property anymore." Sophia's laughter cracked, broke into disbelief. No, you're lying. This is some mistake. Mom, I'm home." Her voice carried down the street, sharp and panicked, calling for someone who wasn't coming. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My throat burned. I wanted to run to her, to explain, to hold her even as she hated me. But I stayed frozen, hidden, because this was the consequence she had written for herself, and for me. The young couple stood their ground, calm but firm, as Sophia's panic spiraled. She dropped her suitcase, banged on the doorframe, shouting, "Mom, where are you? What did you do?" The woman finally pointed toward the driveway. "There's an envelope on the porch with your name on it. That's all we have for you." Sophia stumbled to the step, spotted the white envelope taped neatly by the door. She tore it down, ripped it open with trembling fingers, and read. From where I sat, I couldn't hear her voice, but I saw the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes widened. She read it once, then again, then a third time, as if hoping the words would change. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the concrete porch, clutching the paper like it might vanish. Her lips moved, whispering my words to herself. "Happy birthday, Sophia. You wished I would disappear, so I did." Her sob broke the air. Loud, jagged, heart-wrenching. She pressed her forehead against the porch rail, crying openly, no pride left, no bravado. Just a broken girl who finally realized she had gotten exactly what she asked for. I turned my face away, tears spilling down my cheeks. It was the cruelest gift I had ever given, and the most necessary. Because in that moment, as painful as it was, Sophia wasn't just losing her home. She was losing the illusion that I would always be there to catch her when she fell. And maybe, just maybe, that loss would teach her how to stand. From the safety of my car down the street, I watched Sophia clutch that piece of paper as if it were the last lifeline in the world. Her eyes scanned it over and over, her lips moving as she whispered the words. I knew exactly what she was reading, because I had written each syllable with surgical precision, knowing they would cut. "Happy birthday, Sophia. You wished I would disappear, so I did. The house is gone. I'm gone. Learn how to live without me." Mom. 40 words. That was all it took to undo 27 years of sacrifice, arguments, reconciliations, and silent tears. I didn't pour out explanations. I didn't justify myself, because I had spent a lifetime explaining, a lifetime trying to make her understand, and she had laughed in my face. Now, my silence would speak louder than any 1,000-word letter. I could see the disbelief written across her body, the way her shoulders hunched, her knees bent, her hands shook. She pressed the note against her chest like it might burn through her skin and sink into her heart. Her suitcase lay forgotten on the sidewalk. The people who had once been her friends were nowhere to be found. And me? I was close enough to see her break, but far enough that she couldn't see me. A neighbor approached cautiously, an older woman from across the street. I saw her lean down, asking Sophia something, maybe offering a hand. But Sophia snapped at her, waving her off, clinging tighter to the note as if sharing it might make it less real. The woman eventually retreated, shaking her head, leaving my daughter to unravel alone. And unravel she did. She rocked back and forth on the porch, muttering, clutching the letter, then slamming it against the step in rage. She crumpled it in her fist, then smoothed it out again, as though she couldn't decide whether to destroy it or preserve it. I could almost hear her voice in my imagination, angry, desperate, begging for the words to change. But they wouldn't. They couldn't. That was the power of the note. It was final, irrevocable. I leaned back in the driver's seat, tears sliding down my cheeks, and wondered if I had gone too far. Was it necessary to be so blunt? To leave her not just homeless, but gutted, humiliated in front of strangers? But then I remembered the night of her birthday, her laughter echoing through the backyard. The best gift would be if she disappeared. I remembered the smirk, the mockery, the humiliation. She hadn't cared about my feelings when she said it. She hadn't cared that she was stabbing me in front of an audience, and so, I told myself, I had only returned the favor. Still, guilt gnawed at me. My chest felt like it might collapse under its weight. Mothers aren't supposed to abandon their children, no matter how cruel those children become. Every instinct in me screamed to get out of the car, to run to her, to wrap her in my arms and say, "I'm still here. I'll always be here." But I stayed. Because if I gave in now, the cycle would never end. She would never learn what independence felt like. She would never realize that words have consequences. I whispered into the silence of the car. "I love you, Sophia. That's why I'm gone." The note wasn't just a punishment. It was a mirror, a reflection of what she had wished for, a lesson carved into the absence of everything she had taken for granted. I watched her finally crumple onto the steps, head in her hands, sobbing so violently that her entire body shook. The sound carried faintly through the quiet street, raw and unfiltered. And I knew, in that moment, the note had done its job. It had broken her facade. It had forced her to feel. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first step toward her finally seeing me not as an obstacle, not as a nobody, but as the mother who had given everything and finally chosen herself. I had seen my daughter cry before. Small tantrums as a child, dramatic breakups as a teenager, drunken outbursts in her 20s. But what I watched from the car that afternoon was different. This wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't for show. This was collapse. Raw, unguarded, devastating. Sophia stayed on the porch long after the new homeowners retreated inside, giving her space. She clutched that note like a talisman and rocked back and forth, her sobs echoing down the quiet street. Her mascara ran in dark streaks, her hair clung to her damp cheeks, and for the first time in years, I saw her stripped of all that bravado she hid behind. At one point, she threw her suitcase against the railing so hard the zipper split. Clothes spilled onto the porch. Wrinkled shirts, ripped jeans, a jacket I'd bought her last Christmas that she swore she hated. She kicked at the pile, cursing under her breath, her voice ragged and broken. Then she crumpled again, pressing her forehead to the wood, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. But in my heart, I knew. She was calling for me. For the mother she had mocked and rejected. The mother who was no longer there to pick up the pieces. The sound tore me apart. I gripped the steering wheel, my nails digging crescent moons into the leather. Every instinct screamed at me to run to her, to gather her up in my arms like I used to when nightmares woke her as a child. I could almost feel her weight against my chest, the way her little body used to tremble until I whispered that she was safe. But she wasn't a child anymore. She was 27 years old, and for too long I had been her safety net, her shield from every consequence. If I rushed in now, the lesson would vanish. She'd never believe that I could truly walk away. So I stayed hidden, watching, breaking. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Some shook their heads, others whispered to each other. I could imagine what they were saying. Poor girl. How could a mother abandon her like that? They didn't know the years of disrespect, the endless sacrifices, the cruel birthday wish that had pushed me to this breaking point. To them, I was the villain. To Sophia, I was the villain. And maybe I was. But villains are sometimes just mothers who finally ran out of strength. After nearly an hour of sobbing, Sophia tried calling me. I saw her pull out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed. My own phone buzzed in my purse. My heart leapt into my throat, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't answer. The call rang out. Then another, and another. I sat there, letting each one pass, every buzz of the phone like a knife. When she left a voicemail, I didn't listen. I couldn't bear to hear her voice begging. Eventually, her anger flared again. She stood and screamed into the empty air, cursing my name, calling me heartless, cruel, selfish. Her voice cracked into sobs again, her body folding under the weight of her grief. I had never seen her like that, so small, so lost. The collapse was brutal to witness, but part of me knew it was necessary. She needed to hit the ground, to feel the cold concrete against her skin, to understand that no one, not even me, was going to cushion her fall anymore. I whispered into the still air of my car. You'll survive this, Sophia. You have to. It's the only way you'll learn. Her sobs eventually slowed. Exhaustion overtook her. She curled on the porch, clutching the crumpled note to her chest, rocking herself to sleep like a child abandoned in a storm. And as I watched, silent tears streaming down my face, I realized this was the moment I had dreaded all along. The moment where my love for her and my resolve to leave collided. It was the moment I became both her greatest wound and hopefully one day, her greatest lesson. The street was unnervingly quiet except for Sophia's muffled sobs. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Curtains shifted in windows, blinds tilted, eyes peeked out. This neighborhood had always been like that, nosy, tight-knit in their own way, always ready to whisper behind closed doors. Mrs. Henderson, the widow who lived 2 houses down, stepped onto her porch. She was holding her little dog, her eyes narrowing as she watched Sophia collapse on the steps. I could almost hear the judgment forming on her lips. To her, it probably looked like abandonment of the cruelest kind. A daughter left stranded with nothing but a suitcase and tears. She called out gently, "Sophia, honey, are you all right?" Sophia didn't answer. She just buried her face in her hands, clutching my note like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. Mrs. Henderson shook her head, muttering something I couldn't hear, and went back inside. Her curtains swayed shut a moment later. I knew what she'd be saying to the other neighbors tomorrow. That poor girl. Can you imagine? Her own mother did this. And maybe they were right. Maybe I was heartless. But none of them knew the whole story. None of them had heard Sophia's birthday wish, her mocking laughter, her venomous words. None of them had lived the years of disrespect and ingratitude that had worn me down to dust. They saw only the aftermath, not the decades that led to it. The young couple, the new homeowners, peeked out once more too. The husband whispered something to his wife, and she sighed, shaking her head. They didn't intervene this time. Maybe they felt guilty, maybe just cautious. After all, it wasn't their fight. They had bought a house, not a broken relationship. I stayed hidden, my fingers tapping nervously against the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed that if Sophia saw me, if she caught even a glimpse of me, it would unravel everything. She would run to me, cling to me, demand answers, beg for forgiveness. And I knew myself well enough to know I might cave. I couldn't cave. Not this time. So I sank lower in my seat when a few more neighbors wandered onto their lawns, pretending to water flowers or collect mail while sneaking glances at Sophia. Their looks ranged from pity to judgment. Some whispered to each other, shaking their heads. The story was writing itself in their minds. Ungrateful mother. Abandoned child. But stories are never that simple. I thought about all the nights I stayed up worrying, waiting for Sophia to come home. The money I borrowed just to keep her in school. The countless chances I gave her after every cruel word, every slammed door. No neighbor had seen those nights. No neighbor had been in my shoes. And yet, standing on their porches, they had already chosen their verdict. I swallowed hard, the bitterness thick on my tongue. Let them judge. Let them whisper. I wasn't living for them anymore. I turned my eyes back to Sophia. She was quieter now, her sobs reduced to shaky breaths, her body slumped against the railing. She looked small, like the child she once was, the child who used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare. My chest ached so deeply I thought it might split. I whispered into the silence of my car. I'm sorry, baby. I wish you could see that this is love too. Because that was the truth. Leaving wasn't cruelty. It was love in its harshest form. It was me refusing to let her drag both of us into a pit of resentment and misery. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the street. Neighbors slowly disappeared back into their homes, lights flickering on inside. One by one, the silent audience dispersed, leaving only Sophia curled on the porch steps, broken but alive. And me, watching from the shadows, knowing it was almost time. Time to leave not just the street, not just the house, but the role I had played for nearly 3 decades. Because tomorrow, there would be no more hiding. Tomorrow, I would drive away for good. The night before I left, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the bare mattress in what used to be my bedroom, the hum of the ceiling fan filling the emptiness. The walls were stripped clean, every picture frame packed, every memory tucked into boxes. It no longer looked like my home. It looked like a stranger's house, waiting for its next occupants. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the road ahead. I didn't know exactly where I was going, only that I needed distance, miles and miles between me and the life I had built here. Somewhere quiet, somewhere where my name wasn't tied to Sophia's shadow. At sunrise, I loaded the last box into the trunk of my car. The realtor had left me the keys for the final handoff, but it hardly mattered. The house was no longer mine. I slid the keys onto the counter, placed my palms against the cool surface one last time, and whispered, "Goodbye." When I stepped outside, the air smelled of cut grass and dew. Sophia was still at the house down the block, slumped on the porch. She hadn't noticed me. I stood by my car, watching her from afar, memorizing the slope of her shoulders, the curve of her face even through the grief. She was my daughter, and I loved her more than breath itself. But love, I realized, had kept me chained here too long. I climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and let the engine rumble to life. My hands trembled on the wheel. For a brief second, I thought about stopping, about walking over, hugging her, telling her the truth. That this wasn't abandonment, but survival. That disappearing wasn't about punishing her. It was about saving myself. But if I did, everything would unravel. She'd plead, and I'd forgive, and we'd fall back into the cycle of cruelty and regret. Nothing would change. So instead, I shifted into drive. The street rolled past slowly, each house like a chapter I was closing. The Hendersons' place, where Sophia once played hopscotch with their grandkids. The corner house, where I borrowed sugar on late nights when my paycheck hadn't stretched far enough. Every porch, every mailbox carried a memory. When I reached the end of the block, I pulled over for just a moment and looked back. The house was still there, solid and quiet, with someone else's curtains fluttering in the windows. Sophia was still on the porch, shoulders shaking. She hadn't seen me, and maybe that was for the best. I whispered a final goodbye, not loud enough for anyone to hear, but strong enough for my heart to release. I love you, Sophia. I hope one day you'll understand. Then I pressed my foot on the gas and left it all behind. The highway stretched out before me like a ribbon, endless and inviting. With every mile, the knot in my chest loosened. Fields gave way to forests, forests to open plains. I rolled down the window and let the wind whip through my hair, cleansing me of the heaviness I'd carried for years. I didn't have a destination pinned down yet, but I knew where I was headed. The ocean. A small town by the sea, where the waves could drown out the echoes of the past, and the salty air could remind me I was still alive. Somewhere I could be Linda, not mom, not provider, not nobody, just Linda. A woman with her own story, her own choices, her own freedom. The sun dipped lower in the sky as I drove, painting the horizon in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in decades, I felt weightless. I had left behind my house, my daughter, my past. But what I hadn't left behind was hope. Hope that one day Sophia would understand why I disappeared. Hope that maybe, when the anger faded and the lesson sank in, she might finally see me. Not as the villain in her story, but as the mother who loved her enough to let go. Until then, I would build a new life. 1 mile, 1 sunrise, 1 ocean wave at a time. The ocean town was everything I imagined it would be. Small, quiet, unpretentious. Waves crashed against the rocks with a rhythm that seemed to echo my heartbeat, steadying me, reminding me I was still alive. I rented a small apartment above a bakery where the smell of fresh bread drifted through the windows each morning. The landlady, a kind woman with salt and pepper hair, didn't ask too many questions. She just handed me the keys with a smile, as if she sensed I needed a place to breathe. I spent my first days walking along the shoreline, letting the water lap at my feet. Each step was like shedding another layer of the past. The guilt, the resentment, the endless tug-of-war with Sophia. The ocean didn't care who I was or what mistakes I had made. It only asked me to keep moving forward. And yet, even in the serenity, Sophia was never far from my thoughts. I'd see a girl with long dark hair laughing with her friends and feel a pang in my chest. I'd hear someone call out, "Mom!" on the street, and my heart would twist, instinctively turning before I remembered. My daughter was out there somewhere, angry, hurt, betrayed, and I was the reason. I don't pretend it was easy. Every night, lying in bed, I questioned myself. Was I cruel? Was I selfish? Did I break her beyond repair? Mothers aren't supposed to leave. That thought gnawed at me like a shadow I couldn't shake. But then I'd remember the truth. I hadn't left out of spite. I had left out of survival. Because loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to destroy you. Loving someone doesn't mean giving them endless chances to trample your heart. I had given Sophia everything. My youth, my energy, my dreams. And in return, she had wished me gone. That was the moment I realized. Sometimes the most radical act of love is to grant the wish that hurts you the most. Maybe one day she'll see it that way. Maybe one day she'll understand that disappearing wasn't abandonment, it was boundaries. It was me finally saying, enough. I hope she reads that note again, not with rage, but with reflection. I hope she remembers the good moments, the love beneath the pain. I hope she learns to stand on her own 2 feet, to face life without expecting me to cushion her every fall. Until then, I will live. I will wake to the sound of gulls and waves. I will drink coffee on my balcony and smile at the smell of bread drifting upward. I will rebuild, not as a mother defined only by sacrifice, but as a woman who finally chose herself. And if Sophia ever comes to find me, if one day she knocks on my door, not with anger, but with understanding, I will open it. My arms will still know how to hold her. My heart will still know her name. But if that day never comes, I will still be okay. Because for the first time in nearly 3 decades, I am more than just her mother. I am me. Sometimes love means holding on tighter. Sometimes it means letting go. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to the person you love most is to disappear